like my booth, when we generally only have like a 10 to 15 minute interaction, unfortunately. So I'll be going into a little bit more about the process of getting the bags or the fabric for the bags, and showing you some really cute prints, some of which include, of course, our large box bags. I always find that it's a good way to figure out what size you need with project bags when you can actually see how much yarn they can fit. So I have my current blanket project here, which is worsted weight. This is, I think, skein and a half in so far, and the extra skein here, which you can see here will actually fit really well into your bag. Now, as this progresses, I will be moving this up into a different size. So I do also have large box bags, and I'll go into a little bit more of the smaller bags as well when we get there. And I can show you some prints for them too. So let me share this. All right. I'm going to have to go. There we go. All right. So a lot of my prints will actually show up in large box bags. They'll show up in the knot bags up here, big bags, small bags. These guys are really good for single skeins of socks yarn, which is fantastic for holding baby projects and everything like that. And what we end up doing in Japan is we do actually go, first we fly into Tokyo. We are really lucky from Calgary that I have a direct flight right there. It's about a 10-hour flight there, 9.5 hours back. And then thankfully, Canadian Border Services has been extremely helpful getting my GST figured out every time that I come back, and been very friendly. And what we end up doing is we head straight into Tokyo and then straight down to Kyoto Ondo, Osaka, because I was an exchange student in Japan actually from 2009 to 2010. So quite a bit younger Katie, but it was a fantastic experience. And that's why we still go back to Japan as well. As I really fell in love with the fabrics at that time. And then by the time I had started making project bags, my husband and I had planned our trip back. And I'd been importing a little bit of Japanese fabric at that time, and decided to see what it would be like to actually purchase it in Japan, and figured out that it was actually really beneficial for all of us, or well, everyone involved, including myself especially, to purchase while in Japan. And before we get too much further in, I will give you our bingo word, which is cats, just like our quality control inspector up behind me here. And then if you are interested in getting any bags, I'm also offering a 15% off coupon, FLA21. So Fibre Love Affair 21 on my very professional paper right now. So when we do head out to Japan, we head down to Osaka and Kyoto, because obviously that's where I'm most familiar with. That's also where I'm most familiar with the food. And that is definitely a big drawback as well. So going back to Japan itself. And the first place we end up going is actually a really cool one in Osaka. It's called Toraya, and it's a pneumatic tube system shop. I briefly remember these from the Sears, I think, in North Hill, which is in Calgary. But what they'll do is you'll go around and tell everyone what you want to purchase for fabric itself. And they'll take a little clipping of the fabric and staple it to an order sheet. And then they'll give you a copy, and they'll keep a copy, and they actually send the copy of what you want up the pneumatic tube system to the 4th or 5th floor where they actually do all the cutting. So it's a really efficient use of space as well, because the store looks like it should fit in a shoebox, but it's 2 floors above what you can actually purchase as well. And it's a really cool way to be able to go in and like actually touch the fabric and feel the handle of it and everything like that. And as we're all yarnies, we definitely know that that is a big part of being able to make an informed decision about what we want to purchase. And that is another big reason that it's really nice to be able to not have a middleman for fabric purchasing for these project bags, is I'm able to go and touch it and feel the weight of it, and then determine what it kind of fits into, because not every fabric print translates online as to what its weight is or what even its size is. A lot of the time it's sometimes larger or quite a bit smaller than you expect as well. So we'll do that shop. Last time we were there, it ended up taking them about, I think it was 7 hours to cut all the fabric. So we went from Osaka up to Kyoto on the Shinkansen, which is the bullet train. And if you're able to get a seat on the bullet train, it's about a 10-minute ride, actually. It's not that long. We lucked out that we were able to just hop right on and go straight up, which was really nice. There's another shop. I think we walked up there. It's a 20-minute walk from the station. You can get there by subway, Nomura Taylor, and it's right off of the Kamogawa, which is basically the river that cuts straight into the middle of Kyoto. And that one they're all set up slightly different. So this one's interesting because it will have all the bolts out. You can touch everything, you can look at it all and everything like that. And what ends up happening there is you still tell them what you want to cut, but you actually see them cut it right in front of you. So you order it after they've pulled the bolts off. And they're great giant bolts of fabric too. It's not folded like Fabric Land or anything like that. It's like 42-inch wide exactly, and they have to pull all these bolts out for you. I'm sure they probably think I'm a massive pain in the ass, but it's still fun. And then from there, so that was a nice filler gap in there. I do actually have an expedition backpack now. I don't use it for 10-day hiking trips. I use it for these trips to Japan. And we have figured out that I can pack about 75 pounds worth of fabric into that bag itself. So it works really well to be able to transport this fabric back from the stores, because that is a logistical concern when you're there, is not tearing your arms off with plastic bags or paper bags or anything like that. So we end up doing that shop. So after we had finished in Kyoto, we got back on the bullet train down south, essentially to Osaka, and went to pick up the fabric. And it actually worked out really well. We were able to take our large roller suitcases and set it up so that we can just basically pile it all in, and that's how it was packed to even come home. It filled it up exactly. We have a little hand scale so that I can ensure that I at least know how much is in each bag. So if we do have to shuffle anything when we get to the airport, I'm not paying overweight baggage fees on multiple bags. Our flight attendants, the last trip home, I had planned to be able to do an extra bag between the two of us. So with international flights, you can do 2 bags per person. So of course we have our personal bag. These trips we've gotten down to about 4 to 5 days if we're just going for fabric itself. So it's a very efficient system at this point. But I plan to bring back what would that end up being? That'd be a 5th bag of fabric. And I'm sure the flight attendant was looking at me crazy because she's like, well, it's going to cost this much. And I'm like, no, I planned for that. I knew what I was getting into. And the nice thing about the overage with your baggage when you pay for it is it's actually a 75-pound bag instead of a 50-pound bag. So that trip we ended up coming home with just over 200 pounds of fabric, which is always a really interesting way to think about it, because I've had to weigh fabric here and figure out approximately how much that translates into meters and everything like that. Obviously it changes if you're using cotton and linen, heavy canvas compared to cotton, but thankfully with the hand scale there, it works out usually fairly well. But there's always fabric tucked everywhere. It might even be in our carry-ons, of course. So, and my husband is completely on board with this. It's actually fantastic. He always is there with me for as much as he can make it with his work. And he's really nice to bring along because he's an extra set of eyes and a different taste as well. He is not currently in it, but he does have actually a background in drama. So his design aesthetics are very different from mine as well. My background's in English, which is a different path for sure, especially to get to Japan on exchange. But it's always interesting to take different people shopping. I've actually met up with friends there and they've come shopping with me and they're drawn to something completely different. So that's always nice to see as well, because as much as I would love to just go and buy all the cat fabric, I know that there's lots of people who have different tastes from me as well, and different color pull as well. I'm very much into the pinks and purples and kind of a tealy color, but having a different eye for that has benefited everyone, I think. So that's always fun to do too. if we have enough time after we're done Kyoto and Osaka, we do actually end up heading up to Tokyo, which again is a completely different setup and experience too. There's a massive textile town in Tokyo itself that's easy to access. Excuse me, on the JR lines, which are the Japan National Rail lines. And you can get to it basically on quite a few of them, with one of the direct lines actually stopping about 5 minutes from the hotel we generally stay there. So we're usually trying to make sure that our accommodation is very close to our shopping points or transit as well, because it saves us time and, well, effort so that we aren't breaking our backs or our bags. And the shop in Tokyo is actually a 5-story, which can start to get overwhelming. And that is one big thing about going and buying, again, is it's like you want to take everything home, but actually picking through all of these bolts and deciding can be quite daunting. So I think the last time we were there for a really big shop was about 3 years ago. So the next plan is, with everything hopefully smoothing out in the next year, will be next May. And it'll be a very similar experience in that we're going and we're getting as much as we can to hopefully kind of reduce the costs for everyone, again, for the bags itself, for myself, and for making sure that we're a little bit more proofed against any unforeseen circumstances. Because when I was there 3 years ago, I definitely was not anticipating not being able to travel for 1.5 to 2 years. But the really nice thing about that is then you do have a large selection of different fabrics. So we're always going with an eye to not purchase necessarily the most amount of fabric, but to be going to purchase the broadest differences in prints of fabric. So, and that is an eye that I've had to learn about what to purchase for different bags, because not every print works for every bag. So you'll have a large scale print like these flowers, which look fantastic on most of them. I'm actually quite surprised on how small it can go. And I see Beth here is like, yes, it's awesome. Beth made a large purchase from me after the last Fibre Love Affair. And so she had a really good idea, and I'll show it to you in a moment. But she can show you some different prints too. But as you can see, these large prints work really well on the totes. But then you get into like a smaller print, like the bumblebees. And sometimes they work better on a smaller scale. Now, I really do like this on the large scale, which is impressive because I didn't know. But the smaller ones especially are good for little tiny bags. So like these little dogs and sweaters. This is one of the newest products. It's the triangle pouch. And you can open it up, and this is perfect for a single skein of yarn. It's obviously tight, but you can do it. Now, the idea that Beth had was you can actually take one of these for each of your color, for your color work, and organize them in your larger bags so that you're not trying to jostle a bunch of little tiny balls in one of these larger bags or the large box bag, anything like that. But as you can see, the print itself, this is what we've had to learn is like, so the amounts that I purchase for the fabrics are definitely decided based on what I think I can actually use them when I come home. So obviously the rose one I purchased in the thought process of I'll use it for totes. The small ones like these dog prints I knew that I'd be using for the large box bag, small box bag, and at the time the wedge bags as well, although those are now on their way out. So that's always really fun, is like there's been some prints that have been really large and they can like translate to a bunch of different sizes, which I didn't even think of when I was there. Sometimes it's all experiment. Sometimes it's laying down my template for my bag on the actual print and seeing where it hits. Some of them are so large that you don't want to, the pattern placement doesn't match up with where you want it to be on the bag when you've actually ended up cutting it. So there's a lot of playing around when you get home to see kind of what happens. Generally what ends up happening when we come home is I unpack all the fabric and I take some photos of it to kind of show it off like a tease. And then we will go through and wash it all. And also dry it. So all of the exterior fabrics have been pre-shrunk if there is going to be any shrinkage, which makes them all machine washable when you do actually get them home too, because I know mine has saved my knitting from pizza sauce and cat barf, and I'm sure in the future it is going to save it from baby barf, because we are starting to head into the period of solids with Amelia, who is 7.5 months old now and just started teething. So this is going to be an interesting time period. I'm seeing Lisa, you asked if I'm able to reorder considering the current state of travel. I have enough that I will be able to do another big show push. So generally what ends up happening each year is I'll go through, and with Knit City in October, I do a really big push for October. There's a couple smaller pushes throughout the year for May and such like that, but it's what I've found has worked the best for me, mentally, physically, and just, I can't get the motivation otherwise unless I have a show breathing down my neck, essentially. And so currently I am actually sitting in a really good spot that I will be able to do at least one more, and probably I could push it for another half year. But the hope is that I'll be able to get there next spring, if not next fall, with vaccinations and everything like that in place. And obviously that then I will reassess. The one big thing about ordering is that it's really difficult to find actual resellers of the fabric unless you're buying in wholesale quantities. And at the quantities that I'm working with, I am not a large producer. I'm not a small producer. So the amounts that I need are not going to be able to be fulfilled by a wholesale quantity. And that's where you end up running into the middleman, and the expense is that then someone else has to go out, purchase it, and come back and resell it to me. And I have no problem with that, except for the fact that I know how much it costs when I'm there myself. And so essentially what I end up doing is paying myself to be that middleman to go get the fabric. And things might have shifted. Recently, I have been kind of keeping an eye on what is available from the retailers that I do normally use when I'm there. And it's interesting ordering from Japan because shipping is very different as well. And getting money as well, I've found has been, I order things from people that actually do handcraft in Japan. So I don't have them on my desk, of course, but the little tiny cat charms are actually all handmade. And the only way I can actually purchase them is I basically have my cat charm dealer she lives in Himeji. We were on exchange together. And so every couple of years I go, so we need to go through this again and order for me some more charms. And if you don't mind, can you like send them to me as well? So I know I owe her quite a few dinners, but that's not the system I want to use for any kind of like bulk ordering of fabric, because that's unfair to her. And frankly, just difficult when you're starting to get into, I need 3, 4, 5 suitcases of fabric as well. So if I need a small stock up, probably I will be making an order, but then that also will be in the next couple of years before I actually have to think about it too much. As you can see, there is quite a bit still behind me to get through, so I'm not too worried for the next year. But we will be reassessing at that point too. Let me see, what else was I going to talk about today? What does everyone have for questions? If you do have any questions, if you've purchased any bags in the past and have questions about it, or questions about the exchange, or like how we kind of go through everything. We do sometimes also hit up a flea market in Kyoto, which is primarily used for obi. I don't have a lot of products in that right now because I am shifting a little bit there, which I know I've teased about before and I haven't progressed any on in the last few months. But they won't be project bags as much as purses. So that will be coming up here by the spring, hopefully. We do have another little one on the way, and they will be adding some busyness. So I'm only really able to work when my husband is home. So we're working around that and trying to figure it out. All right, so I got a couple questions. I can definitely show off bags with car prints and cat prints. And I can show you what an obi is. Let me just grab one, it's right behind me. And then why do I like Japanese fabric? Okay, so I'll do the obi, and then I'll talk about the car prints if I've got them on hand here. And then I will go into why I like Japanese fabrics. So the obi is actually the belt that women wear around their kimono. These ones I have disassembled a little bit. They typically are folded in half so that you can wrap it around the belly. And then it's where the bow will be in the very like fancy in the back, or very basic as well. There's one that's basically just a fold over of the fabric, supported by a pillow underneath of the obi itself. And then this pattern, it depends on the obi itself. So as I said, I've deconstructed this. When we come home, they are typically in half on this end. And then as you can see, the fabric or the print actually starts here. And then this would be the part that's actually tied partially around your waist and then used to make the bow itself. So when we come home, I do pop the stitching on that so that then they can actually flatten out, air out. They do have a very distinct scent. It's not offensive, but it's like a silk, and sometimes it can be a little bit of mothball scent, I believe, for storage usually. All of these obi that I use are secondhand. I try to find ones that you wouldn't necessarily use for wear anymore, but I do fall down to the siren call of very gorgeous ones as well, obviously. So what ends up happening is, yeah, we pull them apart, I air them out, and then I roll them to store them so that they don't get more wrinkled. Because they are all secondhand, I don't actually know the fiber content. Some of them I can make an extremely educated guess, but I don't really want to do a lot of like burn tests and stuff on them because there is such a limited fabric. And because I want to be able to use as much as I can of it, I don't want to be doing burn tests consistently either. And that is one thing I do to go through is these do actually have basically an interfacing on the inside. So when they are made into bags, I try and use as much of that in the interior too, so that there's nothing going to waste. And there are so many scraps of obi and obi lining around here that I probably could make another 100 bags, but that's a story for another day. Okay, so for Japanese fabric, why I really like it is it does have a different hand and a very different aesthetic from North American fabrics, I find. When I originally was importing Japanese fabrics, it was very much on the bent of they have some of the cutest damn cat fabric I can have found. North American fabrics are, there's nothing wrong with them. But the aesthetic and the fact that I was an exchange student in Japan and a bunch of other factors, such as the cat fabrics, really tied into the fact that we returned to purchase them. And bluntly, it makes me stand out in a crowded market. So it ends up being something that you get a story behind that, like, it isn't just something I went down to Fabricland and purchased and then came back and made the bags from. And again, nothing wrong with that, but it makes me feel like it stands out better in the market. I prefer the fabrics myself. And yeah, it's also an excuse to go back to Japan and see some friends and have, again, a story to be able to tell even just my kids, if that's the only people who end up hearing it. Now, obviously, everyone here is hearing it, so I'm not too worried. And it's really fun. Okay, and the content of it. So that is one of the interesting things is I do actually end up running into a lot more cotton linen blends in Japan compared to North America. So like this one, I'll keep pulling this one up because it's one of the best examples. It's actually cotton linen. The other thing is I've run into a lot more, they have quilting weight as well, but a lot of their weights are a little bit more medium weight. So they've got a lot more body to them. They're heavier, which means that they're also going to usually last a little bit longer. So the one project bag that I'm constantly using, it's a cotton. All the bags are lined, so that definitely helps as well. And then I interface them generally. But that bag I've had for 5 years and it's not showing anywhere besides the fact that it has had pizza sauce on it. So one of the benefits is that I find that even the lightest fabrics are generally a little bit tougher than the North American content. And it is, again, this is why it's so nice to be able to go and buy it myself, is that like this Polar Bear Cafe is actually medium weight, but you wouldn't be able to tell that online. Obviously, you can't tell through the screen either as I squeeze it, but it is a medium weight compared to like a light cotton weight. And yes, I do have the code here again, FLA 21. And in case anyone missed it, I do have the bingo as well, which is cats. So, and that actually is also where Nekozuki comes from, as its cat lover. We have 3 cats here. They're all the quality control inspectors. And I do still have enamel pins. So you can actually find those on the website. I don't make them myself. They actually do come from a supplier out of the US called Shelly Can. And she does some amazing work with, well, I'm sure a lot of people have seen her, especially in the last couple of years. But she drew me with her, it was a cherry blossom with a yarn ball in the middle, which seemed to be right up my alley, which is perfect. Yeah, but I can jump into some of the prints here. We do have a lot of cat prints, obviously, as per Nekozuki, cat lover, and then the bingo word, which is awesome. But we do also have some really cute dogs too. So I don't know why, but Japanese prints of little French bulldogs are some of the best. And I'm just going to accept it as is. Generally what ends up happening also when I come home is I will make a massive zipper order. So I'll go buy the fabric and then I'll try and match zipper colors with the bags, or at least make a good guess of how many I'll need per fabric. And then we'll have some sort of tab to tie in as well, because I just enjoy that. The tabs on the bags, if you haven't or you have purchased them before, are actually to help you with the zipper. All my bags were designed so that you can actually carry them along with you. So whether you hook that onto another bag with a carabiner or on your wrist, this is usually how I end up carrying a box bag. It's there, and you can use the tab here to pull up your zipper. So you've got a nice, easy way to close it. The large box bags do hold up to about 500 to 600 grams of DK weight, almost that of worsted weight if you really want to stuff it in. I have knit a full men's sweater out of one of these, including long sleeves, and that was a 48-inch bust. It was squishy at the end. It wasn't happy, but it happened. We also end up with stuff like tiny foxes on pink. This is a really nice cotton linen blend as well, which is a little bit heavier weight. Everything is interfaced so that you do have a little bit of shape to it right out of the envelope. And then everything is lined, as I said, inside so that you don't have any seams unraveling into your work. So it's nice and finished. It's just a cotton lining, so it's super easy with these guys. You can throw them in the wash. And then usually what I suggest is you do pull it out from before the dryer, just so you can actually make sure that its edges stay nice and crisp. But if it ends up in the dryer, it ends up in the dryer. It's not going to like murder the bag. It's going to be fine afterwards. And then, like I said, some of the really fun ones are these little triangle bags. And these are, my mission, especially recently, has been to try and use up as much of my scrap material as I can. And so what I end up happening to do with these guys is they are actually mostly built out of the scraps from my knot bags, which I will show you so that you have an idea what that is. So this is a knot bag. It is based on a traditional Japanese bag. Basically what ends up happening is you can take the long end of your bag, put it through the short end, and then you can just loop that onto your wrist. So these are really nice, even as like handbags. If you want to throw in like a phone and a couple cards, like ID and a credit card, you're good to go. I don't suggest these if you have any kind of wool cats or wool hounds around the house or small children, simply because there's no zipper. And that's why a lot of my bags are designed with zippers, is because I find that they tend to keep the little wool creatures out the best. But what you can do, so what ends up happening is that with these cuts, I end up with excess fabric because of the curves. And if I cut it properly, I end up with actually enough to make at least one triangle pouch. So that was kind of the idea behind the triangle pouches. I wanted a single skein bag, so that was, it fit the bill there. It's a different shape from anything I have now or had up until October. And it also then was able to take up a scrap that I wouldn't normally use, or I would have sitting around for 4 or 5 years, not knowing what to do with. And I really do hate that. Because it takes up storage. I don't want to waste fabric if I can avoid it. And these just worked out perfect. So as you can see, we do have lots more cute dogs here. There's a couple of other ones that are super cute for dogs right now, which is a bunch of little tiny ones. So there's little corgis. It is one of the things is that I do find that it's really hard to find super cute dog fabric, which from my perusing in the last couple of days might have changed, but I guess we'll see when we actually get there. And then some of these have been around since day one pretty much, which are the penguin and polar bear. And they are adventuring in New York. So these two get up to all sorts of adventures. They've been to New York. The polar bear actually makes pancakes constantly for this little guy. And it's all in this comic book style. It's one of the most fun that I have, or at least I think so. Again, it's a little bit heavier. It's, I believe they call it an Oxford. So it's a heavy medium weight fabric. And these two have been to space. Some of the other ones that I've been seeing, they were cooking in a restaurant. So it'll be something that will keep popping up as I find different prints of them too. I really like the little triangle bags because they end up being like kind of a little taster of the fabric without being completely overwhelming. And of course, then we got to get into the cats. So there's totally cats fishing other cats here. This one's really fun because they are crossing the borders to the below. And then there's cuddle puddles, which are little hedgehogs, cats, and dogs all together. And this is why it's so important to me that this is machine washable, because obviously if you're using this out of doors, or even just sometimes in the house, the light fabric can be washed then as well. So you're not constantly having a dirty bottom on your bag. Still better, I think, than actually having it in your yarn. And that's the awesome thing about kind of watching the project bags sometimes, is just how much they collect instead of your project. We have some very traditional prints as well. So we end up doing quite a bit of sakura, of course. This one's really cool for fabric, and I think you can see it as it's actually textured a little bit. So that gives it a really neat hand. And it is a lighter weight, but because of the texture, it feels heavier, which is awesome. And then we've got some cactus or cacti. So that was a really fun one to do. And then of course, there's some really cool detailing on some of these fabrics too that, yeah, you can actually see it there. So these little details are all picked out in kind of gold. And this one is cats racing down curtains, because whenever I see this cat, it looks like he's made the regrettable decision of getting on the curtains and sliding down. I don't know which is worse though, for the cat or for the curtains. We have bunnies. Bunnies are actually a very traditional motif in Japan, sorry. And this is not a super traditional version of it. There are ones with the sakura and everything like that, but they're super cute to see still. And then the other thing that does get done a lot too is actually Alice in Wonderland. So that's one of the prints I used earlier this year. And I do know these are based on an actual traditional illustration of Alice, but I can't remember the name, unfortunately. However, they're all over with this diamond check, which is a really cool pattern, including, of course, the Cheshire Cat. Yeah, and actually Beth did point out that these are really good for spindles too. If you go into like the large box bags, you can actually fit a whole large spindle in here as well, including your fiber. Or if you're a wheel spinner, if you take the maiden head off and grab your small box bag, which of course I've set aside, you can pop the handle over so that you have it sitting right there as well, and then you can just pull your fabric out. And with the cotton too, it won't get stuck a lot onto this heavier outside fabric as well. So let's actually head into some of these larger bags because they can be a lot of fun, even whether you have a large print or a small print. This is a good demonstration of how some of these smaller prints do actually translate to a larger box as well. These tote bags are, they all come with the handles actually stitched down. It'll probably feel a little bit weird because they're top stitched out, but when you actually have it on your shoulder, you can open it up without having to set it down. So you can just have it on your shoulder and you're good to go. They're all, on me, I have quite a long torso. They all hit about hip height. So they're just the right height to be able to get in and out when you're actually shopping at a Fibre event or anywhere else as well. And these guys hold, I think the last one I tried was about 12 skeins of Woolies Thick and Quick. So you can definitely fit a large, like a very large sweater or a very large blanket project in them. As you can see, it's quite a bit larger than my face. So I think you should be good for most projects. This cat head and fish is really fun on any of the prints that you can actually find. What ends up happening is I do try and match the tote handles to something on the bag, whether that be a navy or black. That's generally what we end up with so that they're not showing a bunch of dirt from moving them up and down as well. And then another really fun one is rainy day cats. So there's a little tiny black cat here in this window. The story behind, you won't find any black cat bags as black cat bags on my website. They are all sassy cat bags. And there's actually a story behind that. So we've got, as I've said before, the 3 quality control inspectors, basically. This gentleman up here is the oldest man. He's about 10 now. We got them 5 years ago. And when we went in to adopt a cat, this was the discussion. We just bought our house. We knew we wanted cats. And I said, okay, well, we'll go in for one, but you know, if we find a bonded pair or 2, then we'll get them both together because you can't break up a bonded pair. And we're committed enough that we'll have 2 cats. So we walked around, and right at the very front, as soon as we walk in the door, there's this tiny little black cat who stood up against the door and screamed at us. I swear, she screamed at us. And we're like, okay, but we got to look around. So we went around and nothing else caught our eye. And so we went to the adoption person and we're like, we'd like to see the little black cat at the front. And they're like, she's out. She's never out. Usually it's the gray guy. And we're like, the gray guy? And because we didn't see him, we didn't know there's 2 cats there. And that is how we ended up with a tiny black cat who screams at us all the time, with the biggest personality and sassiness, and a gray one who likes to sleep on the shelving behind me. And that's why we ended up with sassy cat bags. No matter what, if it's a black cat on a bag, it's a sassy cat bag because of this tiny black cat. Her name's Dahlia, because when in the shelter, they're actually Salvador and Dolly, and kept screwing it up and saying Dahlia instead. So it just kind of stuck. He turned into technically Remington, but his name is Remy. So then our 3rd one is a giant fluff of a Norwegian forest cat, because once in a while you need a giant fluff in your life. But I don't think, oh yeah, I've got one more sassy cat bag here. So sassy cat can come in many different forms. Sometimes it's cosmetics as well. This is a cotton linen blend, so it does have a little bit heavier hand as well, which is really fun. Yeah, and adoption stories are always really fun. Although I do have to say that our Norwegian had a story behind him too. We did go to a breeder, a very reputable breeder actually. They've won a lot of rewards, but they're in Washington State. Now we're in Alberta, and so this place, it's about a 13-hour drive. We did half the drive out to Abbotsford and then stayed the night because we knew we didn't want to do the whole drive down and then drive back up after having picked this cat up, because he needed to meet us. We wanted to meet the breeder and basically show that we were not just taking this cat to have and stuff like that, and make sure that they were actually reputable. Not a big deal. We went down across the border, got the cat, and then we came back up. And I swear that they thought that we were drug runners or something like that, because we went in to pay as upstanding Canadian citizens our taxes on our cat, because it was not a small purchase. And the guy looked at us at CBSA and he's like, you could just tell that he's like, why are these people telling me they have this cat that they have to pay for? But we get processed and everything like that. And he comes back out and he's like, they look like little lions. It's just like, so you basically took this last, I think it was like 20 minutes to half an hour to process us, to go look at cat photos online. And I think that that's probably one of the best stories I have from Canadian Border Services, is the fact that they loved the fact that we had this little lion coming home with us. Although the first time we came back from Japan, we'd been to a cat cafe, because of course you do this. It's a really cool one. It was just down from a shrine and they were all rescue cats. And they had, they're all over the internet now, but the little Trudeau sticks, so the meat tubes that you can feed your cat. And generally they all love them. But this is the first time we had encountered them. This was 2016. So 5 years ago, they weren't prevalent in North America. And, but we fed these cat cafe cats this meat stick. And I was like, we should get some for our cats, because I'm sure they'll love them. And we found them actually at basically a multimedia store of all places. And so we brought some back and everything like that. And my husband is not proficient in Japanese. I'm actually the Japanese speaker with the exchange and everything like that, of course. But he was like, I'll deal with the custom agent. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I don't really want to talk to them if I don't have to. But he mumbled during our transaction, because we had checked on the customs form that we had meat byproducts, because we had meat byproducts. It was cat treat. It was like tuna and scallop and all these very delicious things for the cats. And the border service agent looked at us and he went, what do you have? And I don't know how this got mistranslated, but I think it was, my husband went, cat treats. But he hasn't spoken to anyone really for a month except for me. And he mumbled, because we just got off a 9.5-hour flight from Japan. And this guy gave us this weirdest look. He's like, welcome home, and handed us our customs form back. And we get it back and we look at it. And on the bottom, in very capital letters, it said cat meat. And we looked at this, and I looked at him, my husband, and I went, I'll explain this to the next border agent, because obviously there's been some miscommunication. So anyway, we went up to the next border service agent, and he looked at us and he sipped from his Tim Hortons cup and he's like, what do you have? And I went, we have tuna for our cats. He's like, oh my God, you people, go through. The best part about this is that we got through with a bunch of duty-free stuff too. So I'm not going to complain too much, but I am sure that we hit the only border service agent who probably has about half a dozen cats at home. And he was going, but Fluffy, why would you bring cat meat home? Anyway, but they loved the sticks. So that was also the uptick of that story. So we've had some interesting encounters with border service agents all for our cats. Any other time we've gone over to get fabric or anything like that, I've had no problems going through border services. But we have 15 more minutes. So if you guys have any other questions, please throw them in. And if not, I'm going to keep showing you some more fabrics here, because I've got a huge pile beside me. Oh yeah, on the same train as the polar bear and panda or penguin that actually own. Oh my goodness, guys. I'm going to blame this on the babies. This polar bear and penguin have many adventures. We've discussed this. And this one is actually that they own a cafe. So this is Coffee Break. This is still one of my favorite fabrics. I've had this since we made our trip in 2016. So that's always fun. It's been in many iterations. We've had it in a dark green. We've had it in navy. We've had it in ivory. I think pretty much any other color that they've done, which is super fun. And then, of course, we've got the perennial Shiba Inu. And this one is actually rolling around with onigiri. snacks, which are always really fun. Onigiri are generally fairly inexpensive treats that you can get from convenience stores, and they're super satisfying. So if you're going over, it's something to look into. They're like $2 to $3 a piece, and it's an excellent snack, especially if you're walking around. And then, of course, we have, this is also one of my favorites, dinosaurs with all the different Japanese names actually written out in one of the alphabets called katakana. So that's always fun to see too. And it's just a fun bag as well. And then we have different bunnies. We've got kind of a Victorian style bunny, which is super fun. I really like this one because it's kind of wintry or Christmassy, but not overly so you can use it year round as well. And then we've got different cat heads with fishes. Sorry, none of the bags have actually been out of storage really since January. But as you can see, if you just kind of pop them, they go right back to their normal shape. This is the awesome part with the interfacing.
Some of us were hoping to see your obi bags if you have one.
I unfortunately don't have one on hand right now because I'm making the switch over with the obi bags to purses more. I unfortunately don't have a lot of stock on the obi bag itself or on the purses either, simply because they're longer to produce itself. The best thing I can offer is that in the next couple months, I'll have some photos up on Instagram. Obviously, that's not going to be quite the same as being able to interact with them here, but I can open them up and maybe what I can do is an IG, like a TV or a live or something like that, so that people can pop in and ask any questions there. I will also be doing a couple more shows, but I don't think I have. I'll have to take a look and see if I have anything actually on hand. Actually, Caroline says she might have one on hand. I do know that she has made multiple purchases. There we go. So this was actually, it's a butterfly obi bag, you can see. And how they ended up being best used most of the time is as a wedge shape itself. So now with the purses, they're constructed very similar. I try to use as much of the interfacing on the inside as I can again, and then they get lined. I'm trying to shift a little bit more to more nylon lining, but right now they're with cotton. Yeah. The obi is really interesting too because the interfacing on the interior of it is to hold up like the jumbo on the back. It's actually really heavy. So it adds a lot of shape even compared to the interfacing that I use on the typical cotton and cotton linen bags too. Yeah, it makes for a really interesting purse itself because it does actually hold up quite well. They do end up getting paired a lot with nylon, not nylon, vinyl on the bottom because I don't want to be damaging the obi. So it is a combination of obi and vinyl, mostly where you won't be able to see it either, just so that you have a little bit of a different bottom so that you're not damaging the fabric itself. Because of it being an obi and everything like that, I can never say if you can actually wash it. So I don't want to blithely like sell you something and be like, yeah, it's machine washable, and have it destroyed because it's not able to. Because I don't wash any of these for sure. Simply because I don't want to damage the fabric itself. And the one time I did try it, did not go well. And that is tucked away in my own stash to use for later. So, and I am offering a lot of these prints as well, will end up circulating, especially these heavier weight prints, not necessarily this one, but these cotton linens and the canvases are also being made into purses too. So if you want something a little bit more casual and everyday, that is something that you can get and then throw in the wash because they'll be paired with a heavy canvas on the bottom instead. And then the obi can be, I guess, a little bit more of a dress purse for when you want to take it out as well. Because not all of them, like some of them are very everyday feeling and they're perfect for everyday purses, but a lot of them are very, because of the ornateness of the work, or if they're obviously silk, I'm going to use it in a different purpose than one that's very likely polyester or a little bit more everyday wear. Because as much as kimono and obi are a dress and evening wear, I have seen them, like a lot of people still wear them for everyday wear. And that's one of the interesting things I've seen even in the last 10 years since I came back from exchange is the amount of people wearing kimono and obi Now, whether they've purchased them or rented them, there's a lot of rental agencies available too, but it's really nice to see that a younger generation has been able to learn from an older generation to use a traditional apparel. There we go. Again, as well. I do know that when we were there, we did actually end up dressing in kimono and obi because, again, at the flea markets, you're able to pick up a set that is an approachable cost for a student. And I know that it actually did end up making a lot of the older Japanese women extremely happy to actually see us dressed in this style, probably in part because there were so few young people actually dressed in kimono. It was mostly older ladies, at least in the area that I was in. And that does still tend to be a general thing, but you do see them around as well. My dorm house mother actually did help a lot in making sure that I was dressed properly, which was always really good because it is quite a task. You have quite a few layers with the kimono and obi, so you end up generally, at least for me, it was an under kimono, which is a plain color. I had a white one, and then the over kimono, which is generally the pattern and fancier one, and then you end up with a belt to hold that in place, with then a stomacher, basically another flat board, which for me was really important because I have an hourglass figure, so you have to make sure that it's as straight as you can get it. So it had basically a flat piece against my stomach, and then another tie over top of that, and then the pillow. No, then you had a layer of obi, then you had a pillow, and then you had the actual obi bow on the back of that as well. So it was quite a process to get dressed into, and generally I either had my okasan, who was the seminar house mother essentially, or my friends helping to dress me because it was quite a few layers to get into. You're very warm in it. And the other difficulty was because I'm taller than the average was at that time, they were generally too short. So typically with a kimono, it's going to be quite a bit longer than your frame, but then you can fold it up to the actual height that you need. But I'm 5'8" or 173 centimeters, which there were very few Japanese women of that height at that time, especially for a secondhand kimono. It was going to be a lot harder to find. I found one, which was perfect for actually my graduation from the program in Japan. But that was always really fun to do. I haven't played around with them a lot recently, but I do have them all away in a chest, and we do have a special one for Amelia for when she turns 3. So 3, 5, and 7 are very special dates, and so we're going to keep it for her for then. It's got butterflies and everything on it, so I'm super excited to dress her in it. And it's fun to pull them out and take a look and everything like that because it's something that I won't normally do anymore, but it's definitely a nice reminder of being on exchange there, like a very special one. So because now the purchasing practices and stuff that I have now are more towards business, being able to pull something out that's very personal is really nice, and being able to pinpoint also sometimes where I wore it or how I wore it and what I wore it for is really fun too. So yeah. All right. I just want to make sure I'm not missing any other questions. We've got a few minutes left, so maybe I'll blitz through a few more fabrics. And if you have any more, let me know. We have the television stars, of course. This one's really fun. This one I really like, mostly because I am in the Calgary area and of course Calgary Stampede. So this is a bandana print basically to me. It's paisley. And it's got all these cats in it. This one is Michael wants to be and David want to be TV stars. So that's always fun. My Instagram is Atelier Nekozuki. So the easiest way to find me, instead of having to spell this all out for you, unfortunately, is going to be through the Fibre Love Affair website. You'll be able to find the spelling there. You can find me through Instagram, Facebook, and then the website as well as ateliernekozuki.com. We have My Pleasant Company cats, where cat everyone is on good terms. Because, why not? I really love how bright this one is. It's also, I was able to pair it with a really fun ribbon here. And I'm loving seeing all the cats on screen for those who have them on screen. Thanks, Yuriko. That's exactly it. Yeah. And then this is another case of the sassy cat, because they show up everywhere. Why not? I know it's not quite the same as being able to go through the booth, so I will show as many here as we can. This is Sassy Cat on gingham, little itty bitty tiny cats. You can tell the little squares are smaller than my finger, so that's always fun. And then to go off the other deep end is sharks and whale sharks. The whale sharks, there's actually an aquarium in Osaka that you can go see whale sharks, and they're some of the coolest creatures I've ever seen. And they have a really cool program where they're all basically rescues. So they end up in some of the fishing nets. They take the whale shark in and then they study them and release them back into the wild. We have Snow White, which is always really fun. And then we also have this one. This is one of my personal favorites right now because all these cats have different things on their heads. And there's actually, yeah, it's this cat. This cat always reminds me of Remy because it looks like a cat. For why the heck do I have this thing on my head? But it's also got bunnies and top hats because you have to, and masks. And then getting into more traditional, we've got koi on a really bright pink background. This is something I would actually associate with some yukata, especially for younger girls. Yukata are a little bit less formal of a kimono that you wear to summer festivals. They're also lighter, so they're not as heavy, like they're generally very light cotton with a lot simpler tie system too, so that you're not dying in the August heat. This is one time that I refuse. I'm sorry, Yuriko. I will never travel to Japan in July or August, and I doubt I will do it in September again either. When I was there on exchange, the first weekend was 36 degrees plus humidity. I went expecting Canadian weather, and I ended up with the worst burn of my life that, to this day, still burns the worst. So I'm not going back in that time period. But that is what the yukata is for. It's a lighter cotton kimono for that time period so that you're not dying in the summer heat. We've got cats doing stretchy things. I love the little toe beans on this one that you can see on the black cat here. So that's always fun. We've seen that. We have alpaca pom-poms. I saw the pom-poms and ended up getting all the colors because you have to when it shows up like this. But this for some reason reminds me of alpaca, even though I know alpaca doesn't come in aqua. We've got sassy cats on piano. These cats get up to everything because we all know that cats do. We've also got cats on paper airplanes because how else should cats get around? And then I will finish off on a very traditional print. And this one is actually picked out in gold as well. There's some detailing all around the flowers and everything like that too. So, and yeah, I've heard Ottawa can be quite muggy and gross in the summer as well, Tiffany. Anyway, I hope you guys all enjoyed, and thank you so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed being able to do a deeper dive into this. One of the biggest things I miss about shows is being able to chat with everyone for sure. So this is always fun being able to interact with everyone. So yeah, thanks so much, guys. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you so much, Katie. Yeah, I love to see you when this whole thing is over. Yeah, looking forward to it. So anyways, we take 15 minutes break and we'll come back at 5:15 with Rebecca of West Wild Thai. So bathroom break, coffee break, whatever it is. I see you in 15 minutes.
Okay. Hi everyone. I just want to do a sound check. Can you hear me quite nicely? I'm going to wait for some yeses.